Hi, I'm Faciliating. This is the second part to the open dialogue in intimate partnership workshop that I've done for a local organization here. And I have decided to share this information because I felt like during the research of it and presentation of it, both I and the audience found it very helpful. And of course, when it comes to any relationships, especially long-term partnership, it's challenging. It's an ongoing process. And even as I speak, I find I and my partner are going through a difficult time, and we are going through growth and adjustment within ourselves, which then in terms affect how we are with each other. It's very scary. Of course, I am being calm and rational as I talk to you, but there have been many moments where I find myself sobbing and scared of the unpredictable outcome. But at the same time, I am confident that when situations like this happen, it's always an opportunity for us to grow. Whether it's to grow together or grow apart, it's this kind of discomfort that'll help us to move on to the next stage of life, wherever that might lead us. And not being afraid to have dialogues continuously to communicate about will ensure that we're on the same page and moving together, whatever direction that might be. Let me just do a quick review. I talked about my family, I talked about the content that will be covered in this entire series of talk about open dialogue in intimate partnerships. And I started with when and what to talk about. So we're still in this first part. And I started with exploring the stages of our relationships with the beginning, where everything might be quite cool, amazing, and then moving on to starting to really see each other, to understand their differences and having arguments, and to a stage where you might be more committed if you move on to that stage, but you really want to change each other. You figure that if you just change, then everything will be better. You meaning the other person, right? And of course, you're learning about each other, figuring out your routines together, and to eventually, as you move different stages, and possibly there will be other people, such as children, involved, you move on to a more mature stage where you accept each other, where you accept each other's differences and still choose to stay together and to build that trust, to work through that difference. That's not everybody's choice, but that certainly is, at least according to statistics, maybe half of the people who might choose to remain in a long-term relationship. And in the end, you will be able to learn to like each other, or to learn to separate, or decide to separate, because that's what makes the most sense. So of course, throughout these stages, we're trying to communicate as much as we can so we can increase the likelihood that we will stay together. And I could be biased as a counselor and couples coach, that I want people to enjoy the fruits, and I want myself to enjoy the fruits of a long-term relationship. It doesn't always mean it's the best outcome, but the hope is that we can work towards it. And throughout this process, I'm making suggestions about the kind of things we can discuss, the kind of things we can share. Of course, they're not exclusive to each stage. And sometimes really the best way to communicate is to really listen. And that's really the foundation of understanding and accepting each other. So what are some of the key aspects we could communicate about each other, that we can share in order to better understand? One of the many things that come up in a couple session in my own life about communicating with each other is understanding first how we process things. And this is very much connected to our attachment style. For those of you who might or might not have heard of attachment style, a really quick summary is how we're connected to our family growing up, really impact the way we might relate to another person, right? Whether it's our parents always avoided talking about things, avoided talking about conflicts, emotions, or negative experiences, and then we become avoidant of those things as well in our future relationship or present relationship. But if it's things that we observe our guardian or parents are quite anxious about, in fact, perhaps overreactive, such as money for me when I was growing up, or worried about grades or performance. And all of that can impact how we relate to our partner. And we might be overly anxious about things like that. And we might proactively communicate in a very anxious, insecure way. So here's where we need to understand our processing style, and this way we can proactively let the other person know this is the kind of thing that will impact me, and I'll react this way. And it's so important to, first of all, to emphasize, right? There's no better and worse. Just as I said, the same person can be avoidant about something, can be anxious about others. Um, we are all different and unique in the kind of combination of things we grew up with. Of course, we will all love it if we could be like this little yellow person who is relatively secure about opening up a topic, talking about things, but also relatively secure about, okay, we need some time, need some space to wait and digest before we communicate. So neither anxiously pursuing to, we must talk about this now or everything's going to blow up, or completely avoiding and running away from discussing that and become a stonewalling the partner. So definitely we prefer that we have that level of security, but often there at least is some area we are either anxious or avoidant. And over time, we're hoping in being with the same partner, observing our patterns, we each serve as that person, that team player who can help each other figure this out and make adjustment with ourselves and each other so that we can learn to be able to wait when there's a need to give some space, but not being afraid to discuss and work our differences out. So yes, certainly the typical behavior when we're anxious is that we're always trying to connect about something, but maybe not necessarily always in the calm and rational way. We're trying to simply resolve an issue so we can get it over with, right? But we are seeking that connection. Whereas if we're avoidant of a topic, then we rather go into a corner and process ourselves or not think about it. Right? And there's, again, plus and minus to each depending on the situation. Some situations require us to perhaps not be overactivated and be more able to not having to deal or react right away, and maybe be a little bit more independent processing. But in other situations, it's much better to connect and work and maybe right away. So it's important that once we understand our pattern or help each other observe our pattern and process things and dealing with things, then we can find the middle ground. Sometimes we really have to come to the table seeing that something might be a lot harder for our partner than it is for us. We meet them wherever they are. And then there are other areas that we perhaps have more challenges. We hope our partner will be able to meet us where we are. And this is a situation where it's never one size fits all or happy ever after or fix it and it never bothers you again. It's always a work in progress, as we say. So we're forever readjusting ourselves as our relationship change, our family dynamic change, as children are introduced into the picture, as parents age, as we age. There forever will be aspect we need to readjust, and more processing style, depending on what's coming up, might be completely different than what we have done in the past. So being aware of ourselves and proactively communicate that will always help us avoid perhaps some of the disconnect and hurt we inadvertently cause each other. But most couples are trying to do their best. It's just simply sometimes we, even though we might be speaking the same language, there's so much different emotions and inner conflicts that can really impact how those things are delivered and then also how those things are received. And that can create a lot of misunderstanding. So this is an area I really encourage couples to first self-examine and be able to communicate that with our partner. And this is another thing that I find in my personal life, as well as in a lot of clients' life, that can get to be a point of contention. Because we're all ultimately, each day when we go off to work or if we stay home as stay-at-home mom or dad, we are constantly taking in a lot of stress. Right? And as an energy container, once we've taken enough stress, we're supposed to be able to release. And all of our ways of releasing are different. Just as we process things differently, we communicate things differently, we also process stress very differently. So this is where we talk to each other and, of course, observe ourselves about how do I find that I can relax by the time I get home, right? So I find that, for example, when I get home, right, because I'm conversational and I'm sociable, I want to be able to talk about my day, and that helps me release. Helps me feel like my stress is shared. And a lot of women who are raised to be nurturing, to be sociable, tend to process this way. Again, that's a gross generalization. Doesn't mean all women this way. It tends to be the extrovert, the sociable personalities tend to do it this way, and that can be both male and female. Um, but then there are others who want to be by themselves, completely, going through their cave and just not have anyone bother them, maybe get lost in a book or a video. And whatever way that works for you, first of all, we do not judge each other for whatever works for ourselves, right? Even if you perceive that to be getting in the way of your connection, just as you might perceive certain processing style, communication style we talked about earlier, whether anxious or avoidant, might get in the way of your connection. Remember, those ways of communicating and those ways of distressing has always served your partner and you. So we must always validate the fact that they were a asset. They were assets that helped we survive whatever stress, whatever family environment, whatever childhood experience we came along from. So we want to validate that for ourselves and our partner. But there is an important goal we're trying to reach that might require some adjustment. We want to be able to reconnect, right? And reconnection can become much harder, particularly as our lives get busier, particularly you have children or other caretaking responsibilities, or you're distant physically due to trips and business travels. Then it's much more challenging, and then it takes a lot of intentionality to reconnect each day, right? So really sitting down together and talk about how do we reconnect at the end of the day. If you want a moment of peace before you feel, distressed, then how do the person who wants talking at the end of the day get their share of the relaxation or stress relief? And you can come to creative ideas about how you can each give some time to the other person that matches their needs, right? Matches their way of releasing their stress at the end of the day. And I find this particularly to be a very challenging issue when couples are going through the first few years of having children. Because before that, let's be honest, you have a lot more free time and the reconnection just happens naturally. Oh, you want to grab dinner? Oh, you want to take a walk? Hey, let's go to the gym together. And a lot of things are spontaneous. You don't have to be intentional, right? And this is where having children, including someone like this you might see in the picture, who are active and then exhausted and then needs care and needs a lot of attention and nurturing, that how do we leave time to nurture each other, to connect in a way that we still remember who we are besides being parents. And this is particularly true when one parent might be more involved with a child and the other parent might feel a little bit left out, don't know quite how to participate, and feeling like their partner has forgotten about them or neglecting them. This could happen to either father or mother in the early days of child caring. And remember, it's not romantic to schedule things, right? Whereas before you're always spontaneous and you're holding parties and going out with friends and just doing things on the fly, it's totally okay to schedule that reconnection, to say, hey, let's meet up at night after the kids are asleep for a 20-minute like wind down and just check in for the day. And couples who have practiced that over time have really found that it's quite effective as a tool to find that space for yourself. Even if it's a very short time each day, it's the consistency that matters. And the third element I find that often can be a point of contention is the kind of love languages that we all have. And this is a concept that many of you might have heard, and there are largely 5 categories of how we might give and receive love, right? Feel loved when we receive words of action or spending quality time, like as in we're reconnecting, we're talking, or someone is doing something for me, and or I buy gifts for someone to express my love, and physical touch. Right? And a lot of this, of course, again goes back to our family of origin. If we grew up with parents who love to give us words of affirmation, then they naturally, that's what we would mirror. We would provide that for our family, and we would provide that for our children. We'll provide that for our partner, because that's what's ingrained in our system. Whereas for someone like me who came from a East Asian culture, where in my parents' generation, a lot of that is about acts of service. We provide you with um, caretaking and do things for you. And that is their love language. And words of affirmation is very rare. And that's something I had to really learn to work with. Same thing with physical touch. Depending on the culture, we might simply not be very familiar with it. So even if we agree with it or enjoy it, we might forget to provide that. So when we talk to our partner about this, we should consciously, no matter how long you've been together, sometimes couples can really assume things that are not true about each other. So talk to each other as if you're just meeting each other and really hear them about how they feel loved, right? And not how we want to be loved, right? This is where we don't do unto others what we wish they do unto us, but we do for others what they wish we would do for them. Right? And that might be very different than what you wish them to do for us, right? So this is a area we frequently, as a matter of default, forget. Because if I want you to do acts of service, then I'm going to do it for you. So you see, to be fair, you got to do it back for me. But it doesn't always work that way, right? Because what speaks to us as gentle and loving and feeling seen is usually completely different. And we often happen to be attracted to people who are very opposite of us, precisely because in many ways, spiritually, physically, emotionally, they provide that balance of energy that we need. So be really intentional about finding out what our partners might need, and be very intentional about expressing what you need to them, and not making assumptions that they know without us telling them, or they know just because we told them like 6 months ago, then they should remember. Because it really takes time. As I said, it takes time to train ourselves. You really have to see this as training a skill we're simply not familiar with, particularly if the love language is very, very much lacking in our childhood. So we constantly have to train ourselves, schedule it, remind ourselves, put in reminders on our to-do list that this is what makes my partner feel loved. So I will show up for them in the way that they want. As we move on to the next topic, it's so interesting how our cultural values and the message about shame and around sex and our bodies can come into this. So it's so important that as a fundamental aspect of connection, whatever is the form of love you've chosen for yourself, that we have the courage to touch upon topics that is as fundamental in the Maslow pyramid of needs as water, food, and shelter. Because sex and love and belonging and connection is a fundamental animal instinct that our body can seek and respond to before our rational and logical prefrontal cortex needs come in. But I want to make sure that everyone understands that none of this has to be perfect. It's important that we address it. It's important that we know that it matters as a part of our relationship dynamic. However, you don't have to have a perfect sex life or what is perceived to be a perfect sexual connection, because there's so much media hypes about how often you should do it, what kind of sex you should have, what type of positions or frequency is considered great sex life. And all of that is so personal, individualized that only you know what's right for you. And of course, you can see their lists on the left side of the screen where people might say, if you have this, it means you have a good sexual compatibility. But again, you're not expected to have all 7 of them in order to consider that you are having a good sexual connection. It's not about perfection, but it's about knowing that it should be on the list of priorities that we discuss and have open dialogue. And it can be very, very sensitive, and I appreciate that. And that's why often couples need the third party, a safe therapist or couples coach to even be able to broach the conversation. That because the longer we wait to have that, the more delicate and sensitive it becomes. And couples begin to fear that if I bring something up, it's going to hurt my partner because we've been having this assumption that worked for us for years. And now if I say that actually I'm seeking something different or it didn't quite work for me the way my partner thought, I'm really going to hurt their ego. So it's important. It's never too late to bring it up, but it's even better if we can really talk about this right from the beginning of our relationship, right? What it means for you to have a healthy sexual connection. Be able to share that with your partner with safety and without judgment is the very foundation of your connection. If anything, it's a work in progress. And this is a concept I come back to again and again because we often are infected or brainwashed by that screen or curtain closing at the end of a Disney movie that implies everything is perfect from now on and it's happily ever after. We are forever changing, and what we might find arousing will shift over time, and that's perfectly natural. We're not meant to be beings who are fixed in a specific type of state. We're always moving through, and our energy fields are always changing. Of course, what we find stimulating will change too. So this is where you talk to each other without making the other person feel blamed or that they're doing something wrong, but simply that you wish to let them know about what you need and how you feel loved and how you want to be touched. Final note about your sexual connection: it is perfectly still romantic to schedule that. And I have couples who, particularly after their life have become busier with children and work, whatnot, they schedule their sex, whatever it works for your mutual expectation. So some examples of how you can schedule your romance is communicate expectations. How and how frequent and what it means to be sexually connected to each other. For some people, that involves intercourse. For others, it's simply touch. And we've had couples practice sensei foci, where it's all about an exploration of their body. We be there for each other. There might always be a leader, a person who's initiating it, and a person who's planning it, and you can take turn, right? So that you don't feel like only one of you is being the leader. But again, if you're happy to take that position and your partner is also happy to be the follower, absolutely nothing wrong with that. So I hope just bringing up these topics about what we could talk about with each other, what we could plan, how we can communicate, reconnect, and how we can make each other feel sexy. All of these topics are absolutely normal and expected in a relationship, particularly a long-term relationship where we tend to lose each other after a while. And we could very possibly lose connection and then reconnect as long as we remember that we need to keep talking. That communication doesn't necessarily involve talking verbally. It does mean we want to be with each other in whatever form and way we find is endearing and shows affection. Back next time, we'll move on to how to talk to each other, so that all the topics, all the courage you have to open up those conversations, to build those communication can come in a way that we can receive each other in a less defensive and more open way. I'm going to, in my next section, talk specifically about how we can talk to our partner about this. If you have decided what to talk about and you are courageous and you want to bring up the subject, you're proactive about that discussion, how we talk about it is going to determine the outcome of how that communication go. Take care. Until next time.